The marketplace was loud, filled with shouts of traders, the smell of roasted meat, and the clatter of metal coins. Merchants waved glowing signs, calling buyers to their stalls. Bright cloths hung from poles, fruit stacked high in baskets, machines humming in the corner where weapons and tools were sold. People of many alien species filled the streets, their colorful skin and strange shapes moving like a restless sea. In the middle of all this noise and light, a tiny shadow bent low to the ground. Her small hands, thin as twigs, reached toward the dust. She grabbed a half-chewed bone, licked it quickly, and stuffed it into her mouth before anyone noticed. The taste was sour, the dirt bitter, but her empty stomach growled, demanding more. She crouched like a stray animal, her knees sharp under torn cloth, her hair tangled and coated with grime. She was no older than 10, but her eyes already looked like someone who had lived 100 years of hunger. Some people saw her. They laughed. A merchant selling glowing fruit pointed and shook his head. "Look at the little thief," he shouted. Another kicked sand at her, making her cough. No one offered help. To them, she was trash, something below even the dogs that wandered the alleys. Dogs could at least guard doors. She was just a child with no value. The girl did not fight back. She stayed low, quiet, crawling closer to the trash pile near the food stall. She found a broken piece of bread with mold on one side. She tore off the dark part, stuffed the rest in her mouth, and chewed so fast she nearly choked. Her throat hurt, but she swallowed. It was the only way to survive. Her small belly had forgotten what it felt like to be full. A group of alien guards walked past, their silver armor shining in the bright suns. She froze, clutching her bread. If they saw her, they would kick it away. They had done it before. Once they even stomped on her hand until it bled, just for daring to eat near the stalls. She pressed herself against the wall, making herself small, invisible. The guards didn't stop this time. They laughed as they passed, muttering how disgusting she looked. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears made others laugh harder, so she chewed quietly, eyes on the ground. People stepped around her as if she were nothing more than dirt. The sound of coins clinking, the smell of fried meat, the glow of polished gems, all belonged to others. She had only scraps. Then footsteps stopped near her. Heavy boots, not the light clicking of alien shoes. She slowly lifted her eyes. A man stood there. His skin was pale compared to the others, his eyes sharp and focused. He was human, one of the few in this part of the galaxy. He was taller than most, his shoulders broad, his face rough with a shadow of beard. He carried no banner of wealth, no fine silks, no jewelry. Yet the way he stood made him seem larger than the merchants shouting around him. He looked down at her, and their eyes met. She froze, her body stiff. Usually, when eyes found her, it meant pain was coming. A kick, a slap, or worse. She clutched her bread tighter, ready to run, but the man did not move to strike. His eyes did not carry disgust. Instead, there was something strange there, something she had not seen in a long, long time. He saw her, not as dirt, not as a thief, not as an animal. He saw her. The crowd continued moving, but the air around them felt heavy and still. A merchant noticed where the human's gaze rested and laughed. "Don't bother," he said, sneering. "That one eats like a dog. She's nothing." Another voice joined, mocking. "Careful, human. You'll catch her fleas." The laughter spread, cruel and sharp. The girl's face burned with shame. She looked down again, wishing she could sink into the stone street. She wanted to vanish, but still, the human didn't look away. His eyes stayed locked on her, calm, unshaken by the mocking voices. He crouched slowly, bringing himself closer to her level. The marketplace noise faded in her ears. She stared, confused. No one ever came close. Everyone kept their distance, as if she carried disease. But here was this stranger, lowering himself without fear, his shadow falling over her small form. Her throat felt tight. She wanted to speak, to say something, but no words came. The bread in her hand crumbled from how hard she was squeezing it. The man's gaze shifted to the broken piece of bread, then back to her thin arms and sunken cheeks. His jaw tightened slightly. For a long moment, neither moved. Around them, the market continued, but it was as if the two of them were in a different world. She searched his face for the usual signs of cruelty, the twitch of a smile before a slap, the cold stare of someone who saw her as nothing. But she found none. In his eyes, she caught something else, something that made her chest ache. It was recognition. Her hands shook. She had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at as if she mattered. The memory of warmth, of a bed, of a voice calling her name seemed so far away. For years, no one had seen her as more than filth. Now, for the first time, this stranger saw her as something else. She didn't understand why. She only knew it was different. The human straightened slowly, his eyes still on her. She thought he would leave, just like everyone else. But instead, he stayed a step longer, watching. The mocking voices around grew faint in his silence. Her heart pounded, unsure what would happen next. She did not know that this moment, the gaze of a single human, would change everything. The marketplace grew louder after the human stopped in front of the little alien girl. Whispers followed him like shadows, spreading fast between the stalls. A few merchants leaned forward, eager to see what this stranger would do. The girl clutched the dirty bread in her hands and tried to make herself smaller, but her wide eyes stayed fixed on the human. She expected him to leave, maybe throw a coin out of pity, maybe shove her away like the others. Instead, he took a step closer. A heavy-set alien merchant with green-scaled skin noticed. His stall was filled with roasted meat that dripped with fat, sending sharp smells into the air. The girl had been near his stall many times before. He hated her, always chasing her away with kicks. Now he sneered at the human and barked, "Move aside, stranger. That one steals. She doesn't deserve your eyes." The human did not answer. He bent slightly, his hand open, palm up, offering no threat. The little girl froze, confused. No one had ever reached toward her like that. Her first instinct was fear. If she touched his hand, would he hit her after? Her lips trembled, her body shaking. But hunger was stronger. Slowly, her small fingers reached, uncertain. Before she could take his hand, the green-scaled merchant stomped forward, his thick tail lashed behind him. "Enough!" he snarled, pushing the girl aside with one swift shove. She fell into the dirt, flashwhack, the bread tumbling from her grip. The crowd laughed. "See? Like a dog!" one shouted. "She belongs in the gutter!" The girl's chest tightened. She crawled toward her fallen bread, desperate to grab it before it was taken. But the merchant's boot pressed down on it, grinding it into the dust. His cold eyes locked on her. "No scraps for thieves," he spat. The human moved then, quick and sharp. He stepped forward and caught the merchant's wrist before it could strike. Gasps echoed through the crowd. No one touched a merchant here. They were powerful, backed by guards. But the human's grip was firm, unshaking. The merchant tried to pull free, but the human's strength did not waver. "You've had enough fun," the human said, his voice calm but edged with steel. His eyes didn't rise to the crowd. They stayed fixed on the trembling girl in the dirt. The marketplace grew silent. The laughter died into whispers. People exchanged glances, muttering, "Did he just stop him?" And "Who does this human think he is?" A few aliens hissed with amusement, waiting for the guards to come. The merchant's face twisted with anger. "You dare?" he growled, yanking at his arm. "This creature is filth, not worth your spit." The human finally looked up, his eyes sharp. "She's worth more than you'll ever see." The words sliced through the air. The crowd sucked in breath. No one ever defended the girl before. She was invisible, worthless, something to mock. Yet here was a stranger, speaking of her value as if it were fact. The green-scaled merchant let out a booming laugh, though his tail flicked with unease. "You'll regret this, human. Protecting her will only bring you shame." But the human did not move. His hand stayed tight on the merchant's wrist until the alien finally ripped it free with a hiss. He staggered back, glaring, but he did not step forward again. The human's stillness was too steady, too dangerous. The girl sat frozen on the ground, her heart racing. She had seen many fights, but never one fought for her. She picked up what was left of the dirty bread, cradling it to her chest, but her eyes never left the human. From the back of the crowd, another voice rose, mocking and sharp. "Why protect her? She's nothing but a beggar, a mouth that eats what's not hers." Another joined. "Humans must be desperate if they care for such trash." Laughter followed, not as bold as before, but still cruel. The human did not answer their jeers. Instead, he crouched again in front of the girl, ignoring the watching crowd. He held out a small piece of wrapped food from his pocket, clean, fresh. The girl stared at it, her throat tight. She wanted to take it, but fear chained her hands. Was this another trick? Would he snatch it back and laugh? Her stomach growled so loudly that the nearest bystanders heard it. Some sneered. The human's hand didn't move. His eyes stayed calm, patient. Slowly, trembling, the girl reached out. Her fingers brushed the food. He didn't pull away. He placed it into her hand, firm and sure. Her lips parted in shock. She bit into it quickly, almost too fast, afraid someone would take it from her. The taste filled her mouth, rich and warm, something she had nearly forgotten existed. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, swallowing hard. The human's jaw tightened. He stood again, towering over the crowd. His silence carried weight. He did not shout. He did not boast. But his calm defiance said everything. He would not let them treat her as less than a person. The crowd shifted uneasily. Whispers spread again. Some scoffed, calling him a fool. Others frowned, sensing a change in the air. The guards at the far end of the street finally noticed the stillness and began to make their way forward, silver armor flashing under the twin suns. The girl clutched the food close to her chest, her eyes wide with fear as the guards approached. They had always been her nightmare. But then she looked at the human standing over her, broad and unshaken, his gaze steady as stone. For the first time in her life, she felt something new, a small spark in her chest, fragile but real. Hope. The girl sat on the ground, clutching the fresh food he had given her as if it were treasure. Each bite felt like a dream, soft and warm on her tongue. She ate quickly at first, like a frightened animal, but when she realized no one was trying to steal it, her movements slowed. She savored every piece, her thin fingers trembling as she lifted the crumbs to her mouth. Around them, the marketplace had gone restless again, but whispers still followed the pair. The human stood nearby, silent, his eyes never leaving her. When her belly finally felt full, something she had not known in years, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and dared to look at him. He was still there. He had not walked away after feeding her. His eyes were steady, and that made her nervous. She had lived her whole life being invisible, yet now this stranger refused to look away. Her throat was dry, but words slipped out before she could stop them. Why? Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Why do you care? The man didn't answer at first. He crouched again, resting his arm on his knee so he wouldn't tower over her. His face was calm, though there was something hard in his jaw, like he was holding back anger. Not at her, but at the world that had treated her this way. Because you're not what they say you are, he finally said. The girl frowned, confused. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since. Before. Her lips trembled. She looked down at her dirty hands, her broken nails, her torn clothes. How could he say she was anything but what people called her? She wanted to laugh bitterly, but instead, something inside cracked. The words slipped out before she could stop them. I wasn't always this. The human's eyes sharpened. He leaned closer, not pushing her, just waiting. The girl's chest rose and fell, her breath uneven. She had not spoken of her past in a long time. No one wanted to hear it. No one cared. But here was someone who had given her food, defended her, and for some reason, his quiet patience pulled the truth out of her. My family, she started, her voice small. We had a house, big halls, gardens, servants who sang at night. She paused, her eyes clouding as she tried to remember. My father wore silver robes. My mother, she used to braid my hair and tell me I was born to be more than a star in the sky. Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to go on. Then war came. Ships burning in the sky. My father shouted, my mother cried. They told me to hide, but when I came out, they were gone. Her fingers dug into the dirt. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hold back. They said our family was traitor. They took our name, burned our house, erased everything. The servants left. The people spat at me. No one wanted me. I had no place. She pressed her hands against her chest, trembling. So I came here. I begged. I ate from the ground. They forgot me. They all forgot me. The human's breath was steady, but his eyes burned with something fierce. He did not interrupt her. He let her pour out the words that had been buried for too long. I am nothing now, she whispered. Not a daughter, not a name, just this. She lifted her broken breadcrumbs as proof of what she had become. Her small shoulders shook, and though she tried to hide her tears, they slid down her cheeks, cutting paths through the dirt on her skin. The human finally moved. Slowly, carefully, he reached out. She flinched, but he only picked up the crumbling crust from her hand and set it gently aside. His voice was low, steady, carrying weight. You are not nothing. The words froze her. She blinked at him, lost. But they said, "I don't care what they said," he interrupted firmly, his eyes locked on hers, unyielding. "I see what they don't. You still have fire. You survived what others could not. That makes you more than they'll ever be." Her chest ached at his words. For so long, she had believed the lies told about her, that she was worthless, cursed, forgotten. But hearing him speak with such certainty made something stir inside her, like a tiny flame struggling to live. Still, doubt clawed at her. If I was more, why didn't anyone come for me? The man's jaw tightened. Because cowards don't protect what matters. They let it die. But I am not them. She stared at him, stunned by the firmness in his voice. His words sounded like a promise, though she couldn't understand why he would make one for her, a stranger. Around them, the marketplace carried on, merchants shouting, buyers bargaining, guards watching from a distance. But for the girl, the world had shrunk to just this moment, this human who refused to look at her as trash. Her tears slowed, her breathing steadied. For the first time in years, she felt seen. She didn't notice that the people nearby were still whispering, still mocking. She didn't hear their sneers about a human wasting time on a gutter child. All she could hear were the man's words echoing in her mind. "You are not nothing." Her small fingers curled against her chest, holding that sentence like it was the most precious gift she had ever been given. The human stood, his shadow falling over her again, not as a weight, but as a shield. She looked up at him, and though her body was still thin and weak, a tiny spark lit in her eyes. A spark that had been gone since the night the stars burned over her home. It was faint, fragile, but real. Hope. The sun hung high above the marketplace, burning white across the stone streets, yet the crowd was colder than ice. The whispers about the little alien girl and the human's defiance had turned into open mockery. Merchants leaned against their stalls, smirking, their voices sharp like knives. "The human feeds a dog," one called, tossing a rotten fruit near her feet. Another laughed loudly, shouting, "Maybe he wants to keep her as his pet. Look, she even eats off the ground." The laughter rose, cruel and unkind, rolling through the air like thunder. The girl shrank back, her thin arms wrapping around her chest. Every word cut into her. She had heard these things before, countless times, but this time the pain was heavier. She didn't want him, the one person who had shown her kindness, to hear it too. She lowered her head, wishing the stones would open and swallow her whole. The food in her hand suddenly felt like a curse, as if taking it made her shame bigger. The human stood still at first, his eyes scanning the crowd. The voices grew bolder, testing him, daring him to walk away like everyone else had always done. But instead of leaving, he moved. With steady steps, he reached down, lifted the girl from the ground with surprising gentleness, and carried her through the laughter. She gasped softly, clinging to his sleeve, her body trembling. She didn't understand what he was doing. The crowd fell into stunned silence when he reached a wooden table in the center of the market, one meant for paying customers only, polished and wide, surrounded by stools. No one had ever let her near it. To them, it was a place of worth, and she had none. Yet the human set her down on one of the stools as if she belonged there, as if she were no different from the richest merchant. The silence deepened, stretching across the market like a tight string. Every eye turned to the table. The human sat beside her, his back straight, his expression calm, but hard enough to break stone. Then, without a word, he reached into his pack and pulled out a clean cloth, wiping the dirt gently from the girl's face. The girl froze, her heart pounding. No one had touched her without cruelty in years. The cloth brushed against her cheek, and her chest tightened, not from fear, but from a strange warmth. She couldn't stop staring at him, her eyes wide and wet. She wanted to ask why, but her throat locked shut. Around them, the crowd struggled with disbelief. Merchants shifted uncomfortably. The ones who had mocked the loudest now muttered, their words losing strength. The guards near the square exchanged looks, but did not move. It wasn't a crime to sit at a table, but for this girl, it felt like a crime against the way things had always been. Someone finally hissed from the crowd. "She's filth. Sitting there insults us all." Another voice rose, trembling with anger. "Throw her back where she belongs." A few shouted in agreement, but their cries were weaker than before. The human silence pressed against them, heavier than any shout could be. The girl lowered her gaze to her lap, shame pulling her down again. She wanted to slip from the stool, to return to the shadows where she wouldn't cause trouble. But before she could move, the human placed a piece of food from his own pack on the table in front of her. It was wrapped carefully, clean, untouched by dirt. He set it down as though serving her in a royal hall, not a noisy marketplace. Gasps spread through the onlookers. To feed her once was strange enough. To seat her at the table, to share food as equals, this was madness. But the human didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly, calm, as if the laughter and anger around them did not exist. The girl's hands shook. She looked at the food, then at him. He gave the smallest nod, encouraging her. With hesitant fingers, she lifted the food and took a bite. It tasted better than anything she remembered. For a moment, her fear melted, replaced by a light she thought she had lost forever. That single bite, taken at the table before everyone, broke something in the market. The laughter stopped completely. People stared, some in shock, some in quiet anger, others in something like shame. The same girl they had treated like dirt was now seated where only customers and guests of honor belonged, and she was eating like she had a right to. The human did not speak a word. He didn't need to. His actions shouted louder than voices ever could. Every hand that had thrown scraps, every foot that had kicked dust on her, every mouth that had called her less than an animal, they all now faced the undeniable truth in front of them. She was being treated like she mattered. The girl's eyes filled with tears she couldn't hide. She bit her lip to keep from sobbing, but her chest shook. No one had ever lifted her up, not since the night she lost her family. Yet here she was, sitting tall at a table in the heart of the market. She glanced at the human again, and though he said nothing, his steady gaze told her everything. You deserve this. The air was heavy, the crowd tense. Some muttered that the human was insane. Others whispered that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong all this time. The guards remained frozen, unsure if they should step in. Even the green-scaled merchant, who had humiliated her earlier, could only glare from a distance, too shaken to approach. The girl chewed slowly, each bite like a secret victory. She was still the same child in ragged clothes, still small and fragile, but in that moment, with him beside her, she felt like more. The laughter of the crowd no longer crushed her. Instead, it sounded far away, fading like an old storm. She didn't know why this human had chosen to stand for her, but she knew one thing with all her heart. This was the first time she felt like she was not alone. The peace at the table did not last. The quiet weight of the human's defiance pulled the attention of the entire market, and soon the murmur of voices grew louder. The guards who had been watching finally stepped forward. Their silver armor gleamed under the suns, their boots striking hard against the stone as they cut through the crowd. The laughter and whispers fell silent at once. Everyone knew when the guards moved, something was about to happen. The little girl stiffened. Her hands trembled around the food she had been given. She had seen those guards before. They were the same ones who kicked her away from stalls, who called her cursed, who stomped on her scraps for amusement. Her breath came short and sharp, and she leaned closer to the human without even realizing it, as though his shadow could protect her. The lead guard, taller than the rest, with deep blue skin and piercing yellow eyes, stepped up to the table. He sneered, his voice sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Remove her," he ordered, pointing at the girl as if she were nothing but a stain. "This street rat doesn't sit at tables. She's dangerous, cursed. She should be cast out." The girl's chest caved with fear. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She expected the human to step aside now, to let the guards take her. That was how it always happened. Any small kindness ended the moment the guards appeared. She lowered her eyes and clutched the edge of the stool, waiting for the rough hands to drag her away. But the human did not move. He stayed seated, his broad shoulders straight, his eyes locked on the guard with a calm that made the tension even heavier. "She is not leaving," he said simply. His voice was low but carried like thunder through the marketplace. The guards shifted uneasily. No one had ever spoken back to them about this child before. The lead guard's lip curled, his pride stung. "You dare speak against the law for her? Do you even know what she is? That creature was born under a cursed star. Her family is gone for a reason. She is unworthy of this city, unworthy of life." The girl winced at the words. They had been repeated to her so many times that part of her believed them. But when she looked up, she saw the human's face, hard and unyielding. He shook his head once, firm. Your words mean nothing to me. If you claim she is dangerous, prove it. Show me evidence, not your lies. The guard's eyes narrowed. The crowd leaned closer, eager to see what would happen. The lead guard's voice grew louder, filled with venom. You want proof? Then bring the scanner. He gestured, and one of the younger guards hurried forward, carrying a small machine shaped like a cube of black glass, glowing faintly at its edges. The girl froze. She knew that device. It was used to identify bloodlines, to reveal the truth of one's family. Her heart pounded against her ribs. If they used it on her, everyone would know. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she wished she could vanish. The guard set the cube on the table with a heavy thud. Place her hand on it, the lead guard said, his smile cruel. Let everyone see what filth she comes from. Then you'll understand why we call her cursed. The girl shook her head quickly, panic rising. No, please, she whispered. She wanted to run, but the human's hand rested gently on her shoulder, steadying her. His touch wasn't forceful, but it was enough to tell her not to be afraid. His voice was calm when he spoke, meant for her alone. Trust me. Her wide eyes searched his face. There was no doubt there, no hesitation. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand on the cube. The glass surface lit up immediately, pulsing with soft light. The crowd leaned closer, every breath held in anticipation. The cube glowed brighter, symbols spinning across its surface. Then it chimed, and the screen displayed the truth for all to see. Gasps rippled through the marketplace. Whispers rose like a storm. The cube had revealed her bloodline, royal, pure, ancient. She was not the cursed street rat they mocked. She was the last child of a noble house, erased during the war. Her lineage shone as brightly as the stars. The guards staggered back, their faces pale with shock. The lead guard's sneer fell away, replaced by disbelief. He stuttered, unable to form words. The merchants who had mocked her stood frozen, their eyes wide. The crowd that had laughed at her only moments ago now whispered in awe, some even bowing their heads without realizing it. The girl stared at the cube, her mouth open, her mind spinning. She had always known, deep in her heart, who she was. But hearing it confirmed, seeing it glow for all to witness, it was too much. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from shame this time, but from the crushing weight of truth finally uncovered. The human stood, placing himself fully between her and the guards. His voice rang out, steady and commanding. There is your proof. She is not filth. She is not cursed. She is a princess of a fallen house, and you trampled her in the dirt. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The guards looked at each other, shame flashing in their eyes. Some lowered their heads. Others stepped back, unwilling to meet the human's gaze. The crowd murmured, uneasy, realizing their cruelty had been aimed at someone far greater than themselves. The girl trembled, her hands covering her mouth as the truth sank in. She wasn't just the beggar they spat on. She wasn't just a scrap eater in the dirt. She was a princess, and the human had been the one to force the world to see it. For the first time, she sat taller on the stool, her small frame seeming brighter, stronger. She looked at him, her eyes full of tears, but her heart filled with something she had thought she had lost forever. Dignity. The revelation of her bloodline did not bring peace. If anything, it made the air in the marketplace heavier, darker. The crowd that had once mocked her now whispered with fear and envy. Some bowed their heads in shame, but others clenched their fists. Power always drew danger, and royal blood was more dangerous than gold. The girl, still trembling from the glowing cube's light, could feel the shift in the eyes around her. She was no longer invisible, but the attention was sharp, cutting, and dangerous. The guards stepped back, their expressions uneasy. They had been so sure she was nothing, but the truth burned in their faces now. The lead guard swallowed hard, his pride wounded. He muttered something about orders and false tests, but no one believed him. The people had seen the glow for themselves. The cube did not lie. Still, the guard's eyes narrowed, and in them was not shame, but something darker, a threat. The human noticed it. His body shifted slightly, placing himself fully in front of the girl. He said nothing, but his stance was enough to show that anyone who tried to touch her would first face him. His silence was not weakness. It was the steady, unshaken silence of someone ready to fight. As the sun dipped lower, the market slowly returned to motion, though it never felt the same. People kept glancing back at the human and the girl, their whispers trailing after them like smoke. The girl sat frozen, the food on the table forgotten, her thoughts spinning. She had been called cursed her whole life, treated as dirt, kicked like a stray. And now, in a single moment, everyone knew she was the opposite. Her body shook as she tried to understand who she was now. The human leaned toward her and spoke softly, his voice steady against the storm of whispers. "This changes nothing. You are still you, and you are safe." She looked up at him with wide eyes. No one had ever said she was safe before. Not her parents on the night of the fire, not the people who spat at her, not the guards who cursed her name. Yet this stranger said it as if it was already true, as if no power in the galaxy could break his promise. As night fell, the crowd thinned. Lanterns flickered on, casting long shadows across the alleys. The human stood and gestured for her to follow. She hesitated, her thin fingers clutching the edge of the stool. "They'll come for me," she whispered. "They won't let me live. Not if they know." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, then nodded slowly. "They might," he admitted, "but they'll have to come through me first." Her breath caught in her throat. He spoke the words so calmly, not as a boast, not as empty comfort. It was simple truth. She rose shakily, her legs weak, and followed him as he moved away from the market. The crowd parted in silence, some watching with guilt, others with envy, but none dared stop him. The alleys were darker, the smells sharper with smoke and rot. The girl stayed close to his side, her eyes darting at every shadow. She had lived here long enough to know what came after attention. The men who had hated her before would now hate her more. A princess in rags was still a threat to those who had erased her family. The first sign of danger came quickly. A rustle in the shadows, the glint of steel, the faint sound of feet too quiet for common merchants. The human slowed, his eyes scanning the alley. The girl's chest tightened. She knew this sound. Assassins! 3 figures stepped from the darkness, their faces hidden under black cloth, blades in their hands. Their eyes glowed faintly, inhuman and sharp. "Give her to us," one of them hissed, his voice like gravel. "She is not meant to live. The last of her blood must be cut here and now." The girl froze, her legs trembling so badly she nearly collapsed. Every part of her screamed to run, but her body refused to move. She felt the sharp memory of fire, of screams, of the night her family had been destroyed. It was happening again. The human stepped forward, shielding her completely. His voice was calm, even as the assassins raised their blades. "No." The words struck like stone. The assassins laughed coldly. "You think you can stand against us alone, human? You don't know what you face." The human's hand moved to his side. He carried no fine weapons, no glowing blades, only a simple metal staff strapped across his back. He pulled it free, its weight steady in his hands. "I don't need to know what I face," he said. "I only know what I protect." The assassins did not wait. They lunged forward, blades flashing in the lantern light. The girl screamed, but the human moved with speed that stunned her. His staff cracked against the first blade, sparks flying, then slammed into the assassin's chest, sending him sprawling. The second came from behind, but the human twisted, striking with precise strength, breaking the attacker's wrist before the blade could reach him. The third assassin circled, hissing, his blade glowing faintly with poison. He darted in, too fast for the girl's eyes to follow, but the human caught him mid-strike, locking the blade against his staff, their faces inches apart. The human's voice was low, fierce. "Not tonight." With a sharp movement, he drove the staff forward, knocking the assassin back into the wall. The alley fell silent, except for the girl's rapid breaths. 2 assassins lay groaning on the ground. One had already fled into the shadows. The human stood firm, his chest rising steadily, not boasting, not even looking at the crowd that had begun to peek nervously into the alley. He simply lowered his staff and glanced at the girl. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the ground, tears blurring her vision. She had lived her life expecting to die alone, unwanted. Yet here was a human who had faced blades for her without hesitation. She looked up at him, her voice breaking. "Why? Why do this for me?" He met her eyes, his own steady and clear, because no child should fight this world alone. Her chest shook with sobs, but this time they weren't only from fear. For the first time in her short, broken life, she felt what it meant to have someone stand for her, Not for power, not for gain, but because he believed she deserved to live. In the quiet after the fight, as the shadows pulled back and the assassins fled, the little alien girl felt something bloom in her heart, fragile but unstoppable. She was no longer just a beggar, no longer just a forgotten name. With him standing over her, strong and unbroken, she felt the truth deep inside. She was safe. The morning after the attack, the marketplace looked different. The same stalls stood where they had always stood. The same merchants shouted prices, and the same smells of fruit, spice, and roasted meat drifted through the air. Yet the air was not the same. Whispers followed the little alien girl wherever she went, though now they were not only cruel. Some eyes widened with guilt, some with fear, and others with curiosity. The girl no longer crouched in the dirt. She walked beside the human, her steps unsure but steady, her thin fingers holding tightly to his sleeve as though it was the only anchor in the world. She wore clothes he had found for her, still plain, still simple, but clean. The dirt that had covered her skin for years was gone, washed away by water he had carried himself. Her tangled hair had been brushed, tied back from her face. For the first time, her features were clear, and though her body was still thin, her face shone with something no one had noticed before. The same merchants who once kicked her now stared in disbelief. She no longer looked like a scrap eater. She looked like someone important. She looked like someone who belonged. The girl, however, still felt the weight of eyes on her. Every whisper scraped against her nerves. She expected someone to shout, to throw something, to call her a cursed thief again. She pressed closer to the human, whispering, "They are all watching." "They should watch," he answered, his voice calm, carrying no fear. "Let them see what they ignored." His words sank into her heart. She looked down at her hands, clean now, no longer shaking, and wondered if he truly meant it. Could she really be more than the beggar they once laughed at? Could she really stand tall while everyone looked? The answer came sooner than she expected. The same table where he had seated her the day before stood ahead. The memory of sitting there still burned in her chest, half shame, half pride. She hesitated, her feet slowing, but he did not stop. He guided her to the table again, his movements unshaken, and sat beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This time, no one laughed. The crowd grew quiet, the merchants glancing at each other nervously. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. They had seen the cube glow with her royal bloodline. The guards who once cursed her now stood farther back, uncertain, unwilling to risk facing the human again. The weight of her name, forgotten for so long, hung in the air like a storm. The girl sat stiffly on the stool, her heart racing. She expected someone to shout her down, but no one did. Instead, the silence stretched until it was broken by the sound of footsteps. An older alien woman approached, her face lined with age, her robes neat but modest. She carried a tray of fruit. Without a word, she set it down before the girl and bowed her head. "Forgive us," the woman whispered, her voice shaking. "We did not see what you were." The girl's breath caught. She stared at the tray, the fruit shining like gems under the morning sun. No one had ever given her food before. She didn't move, didn't speak, her throat too tight to form words. The human gave her a small nod, silent encouragement. Slowly, the girl lifted a piece of fruit, her hands trembling. She bit into it carefully. The sweetness filled her mouth, so different from the scraps she once ate in the dirt. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. She would not cry here, not now. The older woman stepped back, but the moment had already spread through the market like fire. If one dared to show respect, others followed. More merchants approached, some laying down bread, some bowing their heads, some simply lowering their gaze in silence. The same crowd that had mocked her now shifted with unease, their laughter gone, their pride broken. The girl's chest tightened. She didn't know how to feel. She remembered every cruel word, every kick, every night she starved. And now, they bowed? Now they offered food in silence? Her hands curled into fists on her lap. Part of her wanted to throw it all back in their faces. But when she looked at the human, his calm eyes met hers. There was no anger there, only steadiness, and something deeper, something that told her she was more than the hate they had shown her. She breathed slowly, forcing her hands to unclench. She was no longer the scrap eater they mocked. She could choose what she became. And in that moment, with the fruit in her hand and the human at her side, she chose to stand tall. The day passed, and when the suns lowered toward the horizon, the human led her away from the market. They walked through the streets together, the shadows long and soft. Children peeked from corners, staring at her with wide eyes, not in mockery, but in awe. Some whispered the word princess as she passed, though she could barely believe it herself. When they reached the quiet edge of the city, she stopped and turned to him. The words spilled from her, trembling but certain. "I don't understand why you helped me. You could have walked away. You could have let me die." He studied her for a long moment before answering. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see a beggar. I saw someone who had been broken by others, but not destroyed. I saw someone worth standing for." Her throat closed with emotion. She pressed her hands against her chest, trying to hold in the flood of feelings. No one had ever said such things to her. No one had ever given her back her name, her dignity, her place. Yet this human had, without asking for anything in return. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but this time they were not only from pain. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Then I will never leave your side. If you see me as worth something, then I will stay with you, always." The human gave the smallest smile, rare but real. He nodded once, as if sealing a promise. And so, the girl who once ate scraps like a dog walked into the night, no longer as a beggar, no longer as a forgotten shadow. She was a princess reborn, her head lifted high, her steps steady. To the galaxy. She was a symbol of survival. But to herself, she was more than that. She was not alone anymore. The world might see a princess, but when she looked up at the human, eyes shining through her tears, she knew the truth in her heart. He was her guardian,